Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile, the podcast. This is episode 175 called Jaime.
Hello, everybody. This is Allie and Blair, the co-founders of Fertility Rally, and we are here to tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how we can support you on your infertility journey.
So we wanted to let you know that Fertility Rally is the membership group that we created. It's the place we wish we had when we were in the thick of it. We offer support groups. We have private Facebook groups. We have tons of events, lots of videos, blog posts, so much content. We're starting to do IRL events as well. And we want to be there for you no matter where you are on your journey.
Yeah, our favorite part, we had no idea where this would go when we started it. And our favorite part about it is watching all of our members, which is like 300 plus at this point, connect and create true lifelong friendships. We have members that are meeting up in real life. We have members that are supporting each other on Instagram. We have members that call each other best friends now. And honestly, like that is the most rewarding thing to see. We had no idea it would go here. And so we're inviting you to join the Rally fam.
Yeah, it's such a great space. It's a safe space. We also have fun when we can. So we would love for you to be a part of it. Check us out on fertilityrally.com and on Instagram at fertilityrally. Hope to see you guys soon.
Today's episode is presented by Belly. Belly offers modern prenatal vitamins optimized for fertility, prenatal, and post-pregnancy health. To learn more about how to optimize your fertility and pregnancy health, check out their vegan-friendly, dairy-free, non-GMO vitamins for both men and women at bellybaby.com. That's spelled BELIBABY.com. The best part, if you use code ALLIE15, you'll get 15% off your first month of either Belly Women or Belly Men. Again, that's code ALLIE15, ALI15 for 15% off. Thanks, Belly. Okay, guys, so I want to be totally transparent about this episode today because it is a tough one to listen to. So I wanted to let you guys know before you dive into the episode what's going to happen because I don't want anyone to be caught off guard or triggered or upset by any of this. I'm just going to tell you basically the gist of the episode, and then Jaime's going to tell us about her experience in her own words, but this is a COVID story. And Jaime's going to tell us about how after 5 miscarriages, early miscarriages, she did finally get pregnant with a baby girl. But at 23 weeks gestation in December 2020, Jaime got COVID and then the baby died in utero. And they found out actually that the baby, Emily, did have COVID, the placenta and the baby tested positive for COVID as well. So I'm really happy to share this story. And I know Jaime is as well, because I haven't heard this being talked about much at all. So I think it's really important that we get this story out there. But again, protect your heart, do what you have to do. If it's too difficult for you to listen to, I understand. I'm always here for you guys. If you need to reach out and talk about anything, you can always DM me at InfertileAFStories. I just want to thank Jaime for sharing the story and for coming to me. And I want to thank our mutual friend, May Claire, who referred Jaime to me. I will tell you, Jaime did bring home a baby this past February. So she has a son named Brody, and she's going to talk about that as well. But just wanted to give you guys the heads up because I love you guys and I never want to catch anybody off guard. So without further ado, this is Jaime's infertility story. Hey, Jaime, thank you so much for doing this today.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, we have to give a shout out to our mutual friend, May Claire, because she is the one that put us in touch. So let's start at the very beginning with you, as I do with most of my guests. Did you always want to have kids?
You know what? I didn't in my 20s. I always thought I would just be a great aunt or, just a great role model to all my friends' children. And I really didn't think I would have kids or had that desire till I got older in life. It just didn't happen right away for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when did that change? Was it when you met your husband and you guys started talking about family building? And how did you guys meet?
We did. So I spent a lot from when I was 23 on. I spent a lot of my life in Los Angeles, California. I'm originally from upstate New York. And I decided to get a good change in my life. And I had a good network of friends in Columbus, Ohio. And I moved to Columbus, Ohio in, my late 30s. And that's when I met my husband, who had just moved down to Columbus from Cleveland, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And we started dating and, we fell in love. We actually met on Match.com. We just connected right away. And it was such a, I've dated so many times, and, California was just a whole different dating pool to dating in Ohio. I went on so many, I just kept putting myself out there. And it was like 8 months after I moved here that I finally met my husband. And I knew he was the one. I just knew that he would be someone that I wanted to have a family with. And we did talk about having, kids together. And we knew we were older, and my husband's 7 years older than me. And we knew it would be a challenge, but I never thought it would be the challenge that we did go through.
Okay. So when did you guys start to try?
So we got married in August 2018, and we started trying right away after that. We were like, we'll just go with the flow and see what happens. So, I didn't really know anything about everything I know now. I knew about ovulation and everything like that, but I didn't know about like the sticks you pee on and everything that goes,
Same, Jaime.
It's crazy. You don't know this. And, I never had a desire to know it or know.
Right. You don't know it until you're in it.
Exactly. So we started off, and then after a couple months, one of my friends recommended, get the ovulation sticks, and I started doing them, and I got pregnant in January of 2019, and it ended up being a chemical pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
So it was hard on us, but we were like, well, we got pregnant. And so,
right. How did you discover the chemical pregnancy? Was it just the baby wasn't growing, or numbers weren't going up, or did you start to spot or bleed, or?
I started bleeding. I started spotting or bleeding because I didn't know anything about betas or any of that.
Yeah, same. I really didn't either.
So I just thought you took a pregnancy test and then you call your OB office and you go see them in 8 weeks. But that's not what I learned down the road.
Right.
But so I started bleeding, and I went in, and they're like they did, all the testing in the beta, and they said, this is a chemical pregnancy, but the good news is that you got pregnant. We don't recommend, anything but continue to try again, just keep trying. So we're like, okay, we got this. And then we kept trying. We weren't getting, pregnant. We tried to, again, we gave February off, and we tried in March and April. And then finally I called my OB office. I'm like, can we just meet with her to discuss it, because we are older, other options if we need help and assistance.
How old were you guys?
I think I was 40 at this time, and my husband was 47.
Okay.
So we were around that age range, somewhere around there. The years run together.
I know, right?
So she said to us, well, give it 6. She was giving your ages. I would say, usually I say give it a year, but I'm going to give it 6 months. But since we're already 3 months, in from my chemical pregnancy, let's give it to July. And I'm like, okay. So she goes, but in the meantime, we can have your husband take a sperm analysis test when he wants to. So we'll have that ready when we need to discuss in July, if we need to go into whatever direction we need to go in. I'm like, okay. So he did take it in June, and the nurse called me and said, oh, you need to go to see because your husband has infertility issues. And I was like, with his sperm analysis. And I'm like, what? Okay. And she didn't give me any details at all. I was like, okay. So then we call. It took a month for us to get an appointment. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how long it takes to get a consultation.
And that waiting is so hard.
It's so hard, but we continued to still try. And I got pregnant in July. So it was really puzzling, because I got pregnant and they told me about my husband's sperm analysis. And then I get a call from my OB saying, oh, everything looks fine. I'm like, okay, well, how come the nurse told me this? And then you're telling me everything, looks in the normal ranges. So I just we were 2 weeks away from going to see the clinic. And I was like, I'm still going to go even pregnant,
So wait, they had said the sperm, there was an issue. And then they said, wait, no, sorry, there's not.
Yes.
Okay.
Very confusing. I was like, I was like,
Okay.
I was like, this makes no sense. And then I got pregnant. So I'm like, this makes no sense. Maybe the nurse didn't know what she was talking about. But, so we went in to the clinic and I was about 5-6 weeks pregnant and, they took my beta. It was 115. It was great. Then I went back 3 days later and it went up to I think it was like 485. We were on a great progress. So he's like, let's take you in for an ultrasound. And the day before my ultrasound, I started spotting.
Oh man.
And I was like, oh, I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe this was happening to us again.
Sinking feeling, right?
And I was like, at least we're in the right hands with the clinic and everything. But it was devastating. It hit me so hard that time versus like the first time. I didn't know really what to expect. And I was told chemicals can likely happen, but the miscarriage, it just hit us really hard. But I was happy to be in Dr. Jane's hands. He was great. He's the kind of doctor who's very blunt and his bedside manner isn't always the best, but he will tell you how it is. And it took my husband just like loved him from the get-go. And I was like, he's so straight. He's so honest. And I was like, I had a hard time learning how to roll with it because it's so emotional to go through all this whole process and everything.
Completely.
But, I said, I went through a miscarriage without any assistance, everything cleared. And we went into IUIs and he kept saying, he's like, I hope, you got pregnant he's like, you've been pregnant twice. Let's try IUIs. So we went and had our first IUI with Clomid. And I had a really bad reaction to Clomid. I was throwing up 2 days into it. And it was, I had gone out to dinner with my friends and I just like right after dinner, I was just throwing up in my car. It was so bad and I was dizzy and I was like, okay, this is not the right medication probably for me. We did go on with the IUI.
That's so rough.
It's so rough. I was like, this is what it's like. We did the IUI and it ended up, I did not get pregnant at all through that. So he decided to switch us up into letrozole for the next one. So we went back and did the whole process again. I did not have any reactions to letrozole. I grew another 2-3 follicles and I ended up getting pregnant. I was so excited. I was like,
oh my gosh. Okay. This is it. What's happening?
We're here. I mean, I can't I'm like, there's no way I'm going to go through another miscarriage. Like, everyone keeps telling me, you had one, there's no way the odds of having another one is very low. And I'm like, I was believing everything they said to me. And I was like, okay. And then I went for my first beta and it was like 82. And I was like, that's lower. And
okay.
So I went back and I was like, I went for my second beta and it doubled.
Okay.
It was like one in the 160 range. It was like exactly double. And then they're like, let's do a third because we want it to be above 500 in order to do an ultrasound. And I went back and I remember I did weddings and events for a living and I was on a tour of a local hotel and I was with 2 colleagues I really didn't know that well. And I got the call from my clinic and I was walking through and I heard the voicemail that my beta had dropped. And she's like, the nurse was just not really like nice on the voicemail
just
message.
like robotic, like you're probably having a miscarriage.
Yeah. Like, sorry, hon, this is what it is. We'll repeat it, but it doesn't look good. And I was just like, my whole face dropped. I could barely walk through the hotel. I was like, this is the worst place I could be right now finding out this news. And I have to go act like I'm this happy wedding planner from this other hotel and walk around. It was pure agony for the next hour. And I went back to my office and I told my boss, I'm like, I need to go home. She had known I had gone through, she kind of knew a little bit about my journey. And she's like, just go home. And it was like the end of the day. And so I went home and I just was devastated. I was like, how are we going through this again?
Right.
And again. And I just couldn't believe it. And my husband, he's always, so optimistic. And then there's me who's like, why me? Why is this
totally?
happening to me?
I was like that too. Like, this isn't fair. Why me? Of course.
It's so hard. And, we just decided we would take a month off and regroup. And it was coming up. That was in November of 2019. So in December, we took off. And then we decided to take off January again. And then I called my clinic in February with my next cycle. And he's like, because his bedside manner isn't the best. He's like, I'm really worried about you. You're getting older. You're in your 40s, reoccurring miscarriages is usually due to egg quality. I'm like, why didn't you even talk about egg quality with me before?
They never brought that up.
Never.
Whoa.
They always brought up, oh, well, this could just, you're having miscarriages, you probably, like they just seemed optimistic. So I was optimistic. I had no idea. I knew it decreased. Like I knew it would decrease in your 40s.
You probably knew the basics, but you weren't like, they weren't treating that.
They weren't treating it and they weren't discussing it. And my OB wasn't just, it's like, I feel like no one discusses these things.
Wild.
It's so crazy. I'm like, this would have been a totally different discussion in the fall after the first one.
Totally.
I think so I was like, can we please just try one more IUI? My heart was like, I need to try it, 3. And we tried it again. We did letrozole. I had 3 follicles. They were growing really slow this time. So we kept having to push the dates for the IUI for the trigger. And he's like, this is great. It's slower. This is great. Because I had 1 dominant. And he's like, this is really great. It's different than the last time. He was positive about it. We went on with my IUI and it turned out to be another chemical.
So this is number 4.
Yes. I was just devastated. I was like, I can't do this I was like, well, what are we going to do? I'm like, do we have to go through IVF? And he's like, that's when the first time someone had a conversation with me, like if you went through IVF with your own eggs, it would take many, many cycles based off where I was with my IUIs. And I was like, I wish this information was given to me way long time ago. Maybe we could have jumped into IVF like 6 months earlier,
Sure.
I was like, maybe I could have tried then,
Yeah.
He's like, I really think
frustrating.
It's so frustrating. And he's like, I really think you need to do donor eggs. And I was like, I was just shocked. I was like, this is the first time this has ever been brought up to us. And it's a lot to grieve the loss of your own eggs.
Yeah.
And to go through that whole process and everything. And I was like, well, I was already seeing a therapist. I've seen a therapist since like over a year, like since like my first time I was seeing her. She specializes in infertility, child loss, pregnancy loss, postpartum, and she walked me through it. And one of the important things she said to me was, can you give up the idea of having a family, or is it just devastating to you to never have a child? And I like really looked at that like, wow, this is still my baby, even though it's not, genetically coming from my egg in my body. It's still my baby. I'm still going to grow this baby in my body. I'm still going to go through all those things, with pregnancy that way. So
puts it in perspective, right?
It really put in perspective with me. And what I loved about our clinic is I'm sure that a lot of other clinics, they had a whole process to get accepted into doing donor eggs. And they presented to us the fresh and the frozen options. And I just knew going with a fresh donor, I just couldn't deal with any more heartache. Like if anything happened with them, if they bailed or if they didn't have it, I just knew. He explained to us, he's like, if you just, want to have one baby, frozen egg donor is the way to go. And they work with Donor Egg Bank, DB of America. And I was like, he's like, we only work with them. They're fantastic. I was like, okay, this is great. So it looks like we're going to do a frozen egg donor. And we had to talk to, I'm not sure what her title was. We had to talk to someone. She was almost like a counselor too about egg donation. And, I thought she would be qualifying us, but she wasn't qualifying us. She was just explaining to us, the process and how to talk to our children when they're older about, egg donation and, how they were conceived and just like the proper ways. And she talked about embedding it into their knowledge of, when the 4th of July is, but you don't remember when you learned it. That's how you have to embed it in your child's memories,
The fact that they were donor conceived, she mean? Okay.
Yes. So, and she's like, and I know it's hard with, like we talked about the process where like we're using my husband's sperm, but not using my eggs. And she just talked us through the whole process of it. And we felt so much better after that phone call. It seems like this was right before the pandemic all started. And I was like, wow, this is great. And I was at work. It was like the last week before they did huge furloughs, and the world started, shutting down a little bit. Like we have the Arnold Schwarzenegger big, like classic here in Columbus, Ohio. I live in Columbus, and they had no spectators, and people started canceling events, which is like huge for our events, the hotel venue.
Mm-hmm.
People were worried. And I was like, we had a meeting, and I was supposed to go get an EKG and a chest scan. And I was like, to get part of the process. And I was like, oh, I should probably just stay here in case anything happens. And one of my colleagues was like, just go, Jaime. They didn't really know what it was for. Like, go to the doctors. You just go, take a break, just get out of here. And I'm so glad I did.
Why did you need the EKG and the chest scan?
They just stayed because I was over 40. They wanted to have that done as part of the process for the egg donor.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I was like, that's fine. I passed it with flying colors, but I'm so glad I went because if I hadn't gone, the world shut down and the doctor's offices shut down and everything shut down.
Right. So you were able to get that done.
So I was able to get that done, and I probably wouldn't be able to get that done for like a long time afterwards with the way things unfolded. So the whole shutdown happened, and they furloughed everyone at my job except for 5 of us. And I was one of the 5 they kept. So we took the time to really, during the shutdown, to figure out who we wanted to see.
What was on your list of like requirements? And like, I'm sure you guys had some deep discussions about this, right? What did you guys decide?
I really wanted someone that looked similar characteristics to me and similar, background. Like, I'm Irish. I wanted her to be Irish, and, I wanted her to have blue eyes like me, and, just dark brown hair, and just be healthy, and, like a healthy background as much as possible, for what they tell you. They sometimes don't tell you everything in those profiles, but we just narrowed it down one day. We just
Did your husband have any specific requirements or requests?
He just wanted me to be happy. We just went through it. I mean, it was a joint decision, and we, kept eliminating it and going through the process, and, just eliminating each one. And we were down to like 2 or 3. And then he's like, just pick which one, gravitates to you. And I also was looking at how many eggs they had too. Like, if they had 5, I didn't lean towards them because I knew, better chances with more. And we picked someone that had 7 frozen eggs, and she just looked like a younger version of me. And I liked what she said. I liked her, family, health background. And she also, the genetics blood panel, she had nothing. So we didn't have to do that for my husband. So I was like, this is great. We can just approve her through. Our clinic instantly approved her, and we got on the calendar. They opened up in May, and we got on the calendar for June. And I went through, I had a pulp removed, which they think was part of my chemical but they also was egg quality too. From February. And then I was all set.
How did they find the polyp?
They my OB had checked me out, and she found the polyp. Gotcha. So she removed it, and that's always a lovely procedure. So she timed it up, and then they did, in June, we got on the calendar. They do it once a month, once a month they do. Our clinic doesn't do it all the time. The embryologist has one set week that they do, like the egg thaws, the fertilization, and everything. And they also do the egg retrievals then too. So you have to get on the calendar for that. So I got on for June, and they finally got us through the end of the week. I remember it was on a Thursday. So my husband went and, dropped off the sample, and we had 7 eggs, and they all thawed, and 6 fertilized. I was like, this is fantastic. I'm like,
yeah. So you guys feeling pretty good about this so far?
We're like, finally getting somewhere. I'm like, this is great. And I had no idea about IVF attrition rate or any of this because I've never gone through it. And I'm like, this is great. So we waited till day 5, and I got a call from the embryologist that we had 5 embryos. I was like, what? I'm like, this is amazing. I was like, we have 5 embryos. I'm like, this is great. And we chose to do PGT testing just due to like everything we've gone through, and, with, like also because it takes the sperm and the egg, So we did PGT testing, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great. We'll at least have half, like at least 2 to 3 embryos come back normal. We waited a couple weeks. My cycle started. They started me on birth control to go through with the transfer. They're like, we can start you now because we know you have a good amount of embryos. We know you'll get some normals back. I got the call. I remember exactly where I was in my office. I was about to go on a wedding tour, and my IVF nurse called me, and she's like, you only have 1 normal. I was like, how did that happen?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Donor eggs. Because no one talks about this. You think donor eggs are just like sure fit. Oh, they'll all be
Sure.
But no, they can make abnormal eggs too. And, it takes both parties to, it affects the embryo. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like one. And she's like, you want to know the gender? And she goes, I go, yeah, she goes, it's a girl. And I was like, oh my gosh, I always wanted a girl.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, we have one. And I was like, my heart sank because I was like, we only have one. And I knew it took sometimes multiple transfers to get pregnant. I was like, oh, and I just was like, I gotta lift my spirits up. We have one. We got to concentrate on this one. So I went through with the transfer in July 16th, 2020 is when my transfer was. And because of the pandemic, my husband couldn't go in with me. So he was sitting in the car, and that was disheartening because it was such a huge step for us that we're finally going through with this. And I really wanted him to be there.
Absolutely. Were you able to FaceTime or anything like that?
No, nothing. They wouldn't, they just had a picture of the embryo that I could take out with us. And I kept having to pee because, you have to fill up your bladder. And I was like, they kept making me empty it. And finally they're like, this is perfect. They got, they transferred our girl embryo inside me. And I went home and I had taken a couple of days off, and I just rested and watched funny movies and ate good food.
Yes.
I Googled to eat because I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
Walks.
Let me ask you this. Had you connected with anybody like on Instagram or like on Facebook or any groups or anything like that? Or
just McClare. I had just known McClare. I met McClare I think in June, and she was a huge support. She was going through her own IVF at that time too. And she knew I was going through this, and a couple of my friends. Like we really didn't tell a lot of people about this because I've been through so much. I just really didn't disclose. A couple of my very close friends knew, and my husband's family and my mom knew. I didn't tell my dad at all. Because he like when I was, going through the miscarriages, how my dad said, you have two choices. You can either continue to go this and be an older parent, or you can go travel the world. I'm like, why can't I travel the world with the kid? Just like, I'm not telling you.
Yeah. So you guys weren't necessarily seeing eye to eye. That's tough.
No, it was tough. And I was like, I didn't feel the support there, but I did feel with my mom and, my friends. So we went through it, and I went through the lovely 2-week wait, and I was so nervous. I never tested. I just couldn't do it. I was like, I'm pregnant until I know I'm not. I was like, I could not pee on a stick. I was like, I can't do it. I'm already traumatized by those sticks as it is. I just can't do it. So we went, and I got my blood draw, and I didn't know how they were going to communicate with me. They just never told me. I don't know. Like they always, they have a text system through a portal. They called me. They occasionally emailed me. I didn't know. So I'm like here waiting. My phone's always on silent. I'm like waiting. It's on loud. I'm staring at it for hours.
Right. You're like, you're going to call me? You're going to text me? Do I have to check the portal? Like pins and
I'm like,
needles.
what is going on? Finally, I get an email from a nurse I never talked to. I was like, apparently my IVF nurse was on vacation. She's like, congratulations, you're pregnant. Your beta is 113. This is fantastic. And I was like screaming. I was so excited. Chris
such a good feeling.
Remote. So he was there, and we were so excited. But then I got nervous about the next beta because I've been through the beta process before. And I went back, and the 2 days later, and it was almost 400. I think it was like 383. So it basically almost tripled.
Amazing.
So they're like, this is great. We're going to have you come in for an ultrasound next week. So I went in for an ultrasound, and my husband could not come with me because they still were not letting husbands in, or spouses or anyone in. Just the patient got to go in, and I went in there, and he's like, "What was your beta?" He couldn't find the sac. He was like, pressing. He's like, "I don't see anything. What was your betas again?" Because his bedside manners, of course, bad, and my heart started like stopped. I swear my heart almost stopped beating myself. But and then he pushed on my belly, and all of a sudden we saw the sac. I was like,
oh wow.
I was like, I don't know. It just must have been the positioning of where the embryo implanted. But I was like, there it is. I'm like, can I have a picture? And then he kept looking. He's like, let me look. I'm just like, he was just giving me that nervousness, my doctor again. But, I celebrated the moment and he's like, we're going to come back in 2 weeks and hopefully we hear a heartbeat. And I was like, that's the words I don't want to hear. Hopefully.
Hopefully. Yes. Oh my gosh. Again,
like,
waiting.
So waiting. But I felt, doing those lovely shots and everything. I was feeling, I did feel a lot of nausea and morning sickness and night sickness with being pregnant with my daughter. And like, I felt it those weeks. So I know when we went to the heartbeat test, I was so nervous. So nervous. I went in there and he saw her right away and her heartbeat was like at 146, which is amazing. I was like, this is amazing. He's like, this is great. He's like, she's growing, it's great. Let's see you back at 9 weeks. And then I'll dismiss you to go to your OB. So I went back 2 weeks later and her heartbeat was like up in the 160s. She had grown. She was growing perfectly, like right to the day. And I got dismissed from my clinic. Thought I would never have to walk back in there again. I was like, adios.
Best graduation ever. You're like, see ya.
Bye.
Yeah.
So I went on to my OB office at 11 weeks, saw her. She was so excited for us. And my husband got to go in for any time that we had ultrasounds. So he got to finally see our daughter and we had a great ultrasound. And then I went back at 16 weeks and I just had a Doppler visit and I had some bleeding and I didn't know what was going on. And I was really nervous from my past. And they kept saying, well, if it goes away, you'll be okay. I went into one time it happened on a Saturday. I went into the ER because I couldn't go into L&D yet because I was in 20 weeks. And they're like, they did an ultrasound. The baby was fine. They're like, we don't know what it is. It just happens. They're like, it just happens. And I'm like, well, what is this? So I went, it happened again, like the next week. And I went into my OB office and I had a huge pulp inside the size of a female thumb that they think my IVF meds just made it just get like huge.
Exacerbated. Yeah.
So, my OB took it out and I had a lot of bleeding. It was really traumatic to go through that, but she kept doing ultrasounds for me like a week later and stuff to make sure that the baby was okay. Cause the baby was absolutely fine. It was just, it was a pulp that they were able to remove. So we went on to my 20-week ultrasound and she was perfect little baby girl and everything was going great. And my husband got to be there and I was so excited because I finally was like, now I can start buying clothes. And
yes.
I was like, I got to this milestone. I'm going to announce. It was really important to me to announce on social media. I was like, I really want to finally be like, it was like a huge step. My husband didn't want to do it. And I was like, no, I really want to do this. So he's like, we decided to do it on Thanksgiving. And so, I started buying stuff and this was when COVID started getting bad again.
Okay.
And my OB was like, I was like, I'm worried I might get furloughed. Some people come back. I don't know. She's like, I'm good with you staying home. And my husband was like, if you want to quit your job, you can. And I was like, oh, we still have to pay for everything, like it's not cheap. None of this is cheap. It's like so expensive. And I was like, no, I just felt like I needed to still work because my plan was always to stay home once I had the baby.
Yeah.
So it was always the plan.
Had a lot of people in your, friend group or family gotten COVID or like had you guys had it at all? Or?
No one had it that I knew. No one. I had not touched anyone I know yet.
Okay. What about the vaccine? Was that available or did you get it? Or?
It was not available yet because this was like November 2020 before the vaccine came out.
Okay.
And so it wasn't available. And I was like, I'm still going to work. It's, I'm not around these weddings. I'm in a close quarter at work. I barely leave my house. I'm like, we're doing everything we can. I'm still working. So on Thanksgiving, I announced my pregnancy on social media and we got a huge outburst of support, love, everything. It was like the best day. And I was so excited. And we had Thanksgiving just, us because, we weren't seeing anyone, we were being so safe. And I went back, I had to work that weekend. So I did tours. I was doing tours with 2 masks on my face, staying away from people, like barely, like I was trying to do everything I could. And the next week after Thanksgiving, I started having a runny nose. And I was like, what is this? I felt fine. And then My husband was fine. I was like, what is this? And then 2 days later, I lost my smell
Oh God.
and my taste. And I was like, oh my gosh, do I have COVID? But I felt fine. I just had a runny nose. I went into work on a Saturday and I just felt really tired. I'm like, oh, this kind of like, it kind of mimicked pregnancy symptoms. I was like, what is going on? I don't. So I went to bed. I slept a lot. I didn't have an appetite. So I was just making myself eat. Like I had some, my husband was making me food. The next day I woke up, I felt completely fine. Completely fine.
Yeah.
And then
so
Monday,
you didn't feel like testing or just felt like,
no, I was like,
didn't seem like COVID.
I didn't seem like COVID because I was like, oh, I did lose my taste and smell, but I was like, oh, it could be the flu or pregnancy rhinitis, because I just get stuffed up.
I feel like there were so many different versions of it going around. Nobody really knew what was going on. And, I get it.
Yeah. And then everyone kept telling me, oh, if you get COVID pregnant, I've heard people are fine. Babies are fine. And I'm like, okay. So by Monday, I felt absolutely fine. I was off work. On Tuesday, I went to work and my daughter stopped kicking as much. She started slowing down and I was like, it just felt off.
Hey guys, sorry for the brief interruption, but I had to tell you about this new meal delivery kit service that is so awesome. So most of us have the best intentions to eat better, cut back on takeout, and make home-cooked meals. But real talk, it doesn't always happen. Gobble is the meal kit delivery service designed for real life. It's the perfect solution for young professionals, dual working households, busy families, and anybody who wants to spend less time in the kitchen and more time at the dinner table. And I have a really good deal to get you guys started. Start using Gobble, and every week you get to choose from a new selection of 12 to 15 entrees, as well as a rotating menu of sides, soups, salads, breakfast, premium kits, and desserts. You can choose a 2-person plan or 4-person plan, and whether you want the classic meals or lean and clean meals. The best part is that meals start at just $11.99 per serving. And with Gobble's Personalize It feature, you can custom select dishes with your preferred protein. Also, get ready to enjoy summer nights by the grill with Gobble's famous grill kits returning in just a few weeks. I can personally tell you guys that I cooked a Gobble meal 2 nights ago. It was steak with chimichurri and roasted veggies. It was so easy. It was so good, and I would eat it again tonight if I had another Gobble box, but I don't, and I'm bummed about that. Another cool thing is that it's flexible and there isn't a big commitment, so you can skip delivery weeks or you can cancel the service at any time. All right, so here comes the offer. Gobble's offering you guys, as Infertile AF listeners, this awesome limited time deal, which is 6 meals for just $36. So to get this special offer right now, you can go to gobble.com/infertileaf636. That's gobble.com/infertileaf636 for 6 meals for just $36. That's a lot of sixes, but gobble.com/infertileaf636. Do it, guys. Gobble it up. Thanks, Gobble.
When you think of family, you may think of your aunt who likes to question your life choices, or your grandma who always knits you weird stuff that you low-key kind of love. Well, at Hawaiian Bros, we're family, but we're a whole different vibe. We're about having a good time, making good food, a few TikToks, and lots of inside jokes. It's just who we are. So, ready to join our fam? Apply today at hawaiianbros.com. Hawaiian Bros. It's a vibe.
My husband was making dinner and I started spotting, and so I went into L&D and they found it was remnants of the pulp. They're like, your baby's great. Your baby looks great. And she started kicking a little bit more once I was in there, and they're like, your placenta looks great. Your baby looks great. Everything looks great. It's just, you might have this throughout your entire pregnancy because of the pulp. And I was like, because they couldn't scrape all of it off because I was pregnant. I was like, okay, that makes sense. I went home, she was kicking. The next day I woke up, there was no movement. And I was like, okay, maybe, she'll move throughout the day. I felt her at lunch kick me one last time. I felt her she kicked me hard. And then, sorry, I started crying about this, but I was like, she must be fine. And so
do not apologize. I'm getting all teary too.
I called my OB office. I was like, she's not moving as much. Go back to L&D. I decided, because I had this huge VIP tour, to stay for my tour. And I was like, because I was so dedicated to my job. I was like, it was crazy. I don't know why, but I was
No,
just
it's
so
not crazy. I think
I
women,
did.
we're pulled in a million different directions, and it
Yes.
makes sense.
Yeah. So I was like, I'll do this tour. I did the tour that I'm going in. I went into my boss's. I was like, I need to go to L&D. She's not kicking as much. I just need to go. She's like, go. And I had taken the next day off because I just was overwhelmed with like brides and like they were closing things down again. I was just like, I can't. It was really stressful dealing with weddings in general during a pandemic as it is being pregnant. And I was like, well, I'm off tomorrow. I'm going to L&D. I went there. And they found her heartbeat. It was absolutely normal. They're like, it's a normal heartbeat. It was like 160. It was in the 160 range. Like, she's not moving. They did an ultrasound. They saw her curled up in a ball. They're like, maybe she's sleeping. This is the things that they were saying to me. Maybe she's sleeping. And my OB was on call. So she was at I think she was at the hospital. And she said, okay, give her something to eat. They gave me crackers and some orange juice. They have her lay for an hour. And if she's still not moving, they're going to do that buzzer, that little buzzer thing. And I forget what it's called.
I don't either, but to try to kind of wake up the baby.
Yes. Right? And I was like, okay. So I was lying there and I just knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
I just was eating and she wasn't moving. Oh
God.
And
freaking out.
And then they came in with the ultrasound and my husband was on his way. He walked in at that point and I was like, I need to pee. And I went down the hallway. I went to the bathroom and I just knew something was wrong. And it was so hard because I heard them in this one other woman and like, because you know how like Elodie, they have all those little rooms, like, and I heard their baby's heartbeat and I was like, oh my God, what if I don't hear my baby's heartbeat? So I walked back and they put, they did the ultrasound again and there was no heartbeat. So it like from like normal to nothing in an hour. I was like, they're like, this is just a tragedy. Like, we don't know what happened. This is a very rare circumstance. We don't know what happened. I'm sorry. I was just in shock. Like the way they told me.
Jaime.
And I was like, this is awful. I'm like, and then my OB comes in and she's like, oh my gosh. And she's like, I don't know what happened. She goes, this was not the pulp. This is just a rare occurrence. Like, this is awful. Like, they're going to give you your options. What do you want to do? I'm like, well, I want to deliver her. She like deserves to be delivered. I'm going to deliver this baby. So they make you take a COVID test to deliver and to get admitted into the hospital. And my COVID test came back positive and I was shocked. I was shocked, but not shocked because I had been sick. And I was like, was it COVID? And did the COVID do this? And my OB's like, there's no way COVID did this. There's no way. She goes, you were barely sick. There's no way COVID did this. We don't know. We'll do testing. We'll find out the answers. There's no way. So I got admitted because I had COVID. My platelets were off, so I couldn't have an epidural. And it was the longest 24 hours. They had to put a balloon in me.
Oh gosh.
I finally got to deliver her when I was like 8 centimeters. So she was only like a little over a pound. My water broke. And then I delivered her, but she was breached. So they couldn't get her out right away. It was just the whole, I just remember the whole thing. Like the room was dark. We couldn't leave the room. People were coming in weird outfits because of COVID. And
was your husband able to be there with you, even though you were COVID positive? Did he have to wear like a hazmat suit or something? Or like
he didn't. They treated him like he had COVID
too.
So they treated us both and we couldn't leave the small. I just remember it being so dark and dreary, and it was just awful. I just, I kept going in and out of sleep. And then I finally, the doctor on call came in and they helped deliver her. And they're like, we're going to wash her up. And when you're ready to see her, you can see her. And I was like, I just need to sleep. I didn't know that my OB had asked for my daughter and my placenta to be COVID tested after delivery.
Okay.
Which I'm glad she was an advocate for.
Yes.
They did tell me that they did that after some time. And they're like, do you want to know the results? And I'm like, no, because if she's positive, I'll hate myself.
Oh.
And so they didn't tell us. And we got to hold her and it was awful. It was like, I just kept apologizing to her. And like, she was like this perfect little 1 pound baby. And she was dressed in like this little pink outfit. It was awful. It was like the darkest day of my life. And
I'm so sorry.
They took pictures and we did everything we could. They baptized her and did everything that we could do for her. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was just I'm claustrophobic. And I just remember the next day, it just hit me. I was like, I need to get out of this small room. And I remember like, he just like had her on this table and I had to like, they're wheeling you off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just like, she should be going home with me. She should still be in me. And like, she's just lying on this table and it was awful. And we went home and I was like in such raw shock. It was awful. Raw shock. I was like, how did this happen? And I just kept thinking, was it this I ate? Was it this I did? I just kept over analyzing. And I took a shower and I was like screaming in the shower. And like my husband was like, we got so close during this. And it was just awful. And we had such a good support system. And, you know, I had announced 2 weeks earlier. So I had taken down the post. Mm-hmm. I was just like, I'm not going to say anything. You know, I wrote a little Instagram post, you know, just saying that we had lost her. And I didn't post it on Facebook. I just posted it on Instagram. And we had an outreach of support from like my old jobs, like my husband's job, like friends, one of my best friends did like a meal train for us. So each day, and I kept getting, you know, remembrance presents. And I just was in this raw shock pain that this happened. And then I instantly was like, I need to try again, because I was like, I didn't even grieve yet. And I was just like, we need to try again. I had reached out to my clinic that I thought I said goodbye to, and I got a virtual meeting with him. And the thing about him is my OB had called Dr. Jane from my clinic, and he had texted us while we were still in the hospital that he was so sorry for us. And I was like, oh, maybe it'll be a different, you know, he was checking in on us. And I think he knew the reason of our loss. And I had gone before our appointment with him, like we had a virtual Zoom. I'd gone in for like a follow-up postpartum checkup with my OB. And I was like, is it this? Is it this? And she goes, Jaime, do you really want to know the reason? And I was like, yes. She goes, it was COVID. Your daughter and your placenta tested positive for COVID. And I was like, what? And this was before a vaccine was out. This was before even people knew what COVID did to placenta. Is like, no. And she's like, you're our first patient that like, we've never seen this. And she goes, I reached out to the hospital and they're saying they see this weekly where people test positive for COVID and then they're losing their babies either early or as a stillborn. Like my daughter is a stillborn when she was 23 weeks gestation. And she goes, they're seeing this, you know, later in pregnancies too. She goes, I wasn't aware of this. And she goes, both your daughter and your placenta tested positive, and your placenta showed the virus and had a blood clot that the virus created. And that's the reason why my daughter passed.
I'm so sorry, Jaime.
It was awful. Like I went from like this raw shock to like this hatred for myself, because I was like, how can I catch this? You know, like, well, everyone was catching it at that point. That's when everyone started getting it in like December. And then they started saying they were coming out with a vaccine. I was like, oh my God, I was so close to this vaccine being out. And then I lost her before this was out. And I went through like, had to pick my soul off the ground. And I was like, how am I going to go? Like, it was awful. I had to go right back to work, you know, because they don't give enough time off for women when they lose a baby. They do when you have a baby.
Yeah.
They don't when you lose a baby. I got 3 bereavement days, and then I had to take 2 week vacation. Vacation days. That's not vacation. I was like, this is awful. So I went back to work way too early. I locked myself in the office all the time. I totally alienated myself from everyone I worked with. I just didn't know how to grieve. And then I had to go on these wedding tours and be positive and then
celebrate people's like next chapter. And that must have been
I was at
so
like
hard.
the lowest I could ever be.
Absolutely.
It was awful. And I was like, I didn't know how to pick myself up. And I had all these friends, you know, reaching out to me and such a huge support system, but I didn't know how to physically pick myself up. I didn't know how to do it. And we had the consultation again with Dr. Jane at RDI, and he's like, he had known how we lost her, because I think my OB told him, and he's like, you know, this is really unfortunate. You should still be pregnant. course, he says things like that. I was like, that makes it feel worse. He's like, we just need to go through this process again because, you know, you only had one normal at that round, you know. He's like, well, you just got to pick another donor and go through it. He's like, you need 2 period cycles. And I'm like, oh, I need more than 2 period cycles after this. It's like, it's weird how they say different things. You know, if you have a live birth, it's 6 months and then a year for a season. I'm like, 2 period cycles after a stillborn. I still had a baby. I'm like, I need more time than that. I need to get my body back, you know? And I went and tested for the antibodies and I had them for COVID and I was like, that's good. But because I had them, I couldn't get the vaccine till like the end of March. But that's when my age group was starting to get available anyway. So I started acupuncture for my soul, for my well-being. And
how did you and your husband get, you know, start this grieving process? And, you know, I always like to ask how this affected your relationship. You said that the COVID had brought you guys closer together. Did it
brought us
continue?
Closer together? It really continued. And we really knew, even though I was seeing everyone I was pregnant at the same time would have their babies and it was just so hard. And he's like, our time will come, our time will come. And I found out my close cousin was pregnant and I was like, it just was so hard. Not like I wasn't happy for people. I'm so happy for them. It was just so hard because we wanted that so much.
Of course. I've said this so many times, but it's possible to be happy for other people and so sad for yourself at the same time. You know?
And we had to bury our daughter. Like it was devastating. 4 days before Christmas, we buried our daughter. Christmas will never be the same.
Did you name her?
Emily is her name. Emily Elizabeth. Emily was my grandmother and Elizabeth was my husband's grandmother. And I was actually supposed to be named Elizabeth, but my cousin Elizabeth was born 3 months prior to I was. So, you know, she was buried right next in my husband's family plot in Cleveland. And we got this past year, they redid the gravestone and her name's on it with special star for like stillborn and everything like that. But it's just, it was so hard. And then, you know, when I just felt that I had to go through the grieving points of all those milestones of like the pregnancy before I could do a transfer. Again, I was like, we decided, you know, we're just going to take this slow. And I got into acupuncture. We were both going to therapy. I was doing, you know, everything I could to like physically heal. I was like, I don't know, mentally how, you know, if you ever really
I don't think you ever get over something like that.
You don't. And we picked a new donor. I really liked her. She had 2 kids of her own. She looked, you know, a lot of similar characteristics as me. We picked her in March and I was like, this is great. We'll have an April, you know, like they do it once a month. And I was like, this is great. I started acupuncture. April 8th is when I was due with Emily. And it was the same week as the thaw and everything. I was like, maybe it's a sign, you know, it's the same week. And we planned on going visiting her gravestone and everything on the day I was due. And my second COVID vaccine shot was on her due date that we went. I was like, which stung me so much that I was getting a COVID shot versus having a baby.
Oh my God.
You know, losing them to COVID. It was just like, everything was just a reminder. And people were like, oh, this is getting, you know, the world's getting better again, where I just didn't feel better. I was like, this, like, I was a different person. I was never going to be.
You must have had so much anger too, just towards COVID in general, right? Like, tell me about that.
Oh, I was so angry. I'm still angry. I hate COVID so much. And when I hear about people getting COVID, I just like, it just triggers me. Anytime anyone says the C word, it triggers me. Yeah. Or I hear about someone like, you know, it's so hard. You know, I reached out I got really involved in the loss community with like stillborn Facebook group. And I was seeing other women go through it. Yeah. Other women go through it and other women go through it. And I was like, I'm not alone, but this is just the worst club to be in. Yeah. And it was awful. And then I'd hear of women being fine having it. I was like, how was I not fine? And I'm really happy for them that they didn't have to go through my type of loss. I wouldn't wish my loss on anyone, but I was like, how are they fine? And I wasn't fine. How is their baby okay? And my baby wasn't okay. I just didn't find it, you know, like when you go through loss, it's like, it's still hard. And we went through in April, we got the new donor eggs to our clinic and we went through the fertilization, and the next day, they usually get like an email, like first thing in the morning to like a little report like we did the first time. So I was basing this off everything from the first time. and they never got it. I was like, what is going on? Finally, at like 1 p.m., the embryologist calls me. I was like, well, this can't be good. He's like, Jaime, I've never seen this happen with DEB, but we only had, out of 7 eggs, she had 7. We only had 2 survive the thaw. I was like, what?
Oh my God.
2? And I knew attrition rates by then. I was like, it's finally really, because I started studying it, like, because I'm the crazy person during all this. I was like locked in my office, like analyzing all this. And I was like, that's awful. He's like, but they both fertilize. Let's just see how they grow, because they have a 1 blast guarantee. And I instantly reached out to DB, and they're like, well, you just have to go through the process. They just weren't really sympathetic. They were just like, I'm like, this is a bad thought for how much we pay. I didn't, your attrition rate and what you preach on your websites. I was like, had it. I was angry. I was so angry. It was like I was taking off the anger from like losing my daughter out on this cycle to DEB. I was so angry. And so that week, my husband's like, just be optimistic. We'll get, we got 5 last time. Maybe we'll have 2 embryos, send them to testing. Maybe they'll both be normal. Let's just keep going forward. So we went and we went to Cleveland and we visited the gravestone on, April 8th. And it was just so hard. It was just devastating. Yeah. And then it was just like one of the hardest days. And then 2 days later, I get a call later in the day. Not how they called me earlier, because I keep comparing it to last time. And it was from my doctor. And he's like, I'm so sorry. None of them made it's even 6-day blast. I was like, oh my gosh. He's like,
I don't know
Jaime,
how you were like going through your days at this point. It's just like bad news after bad news after
I just kept leaving work. I was like, they probably think they just never, they just let me be. And they're like, I was still doing my job and making my numbers. I just like literally, and he's like, but the good thing, he's like, I'd rather have this than send one to PG testing and have it, you spend, $5,000 on PG testing and have it come back. He's like, and then you have to, he's like, this is a free replacement line. They owe you a free replacement line. He's like, let's look at it this way. And I was like, okay. He really pepped me up. And I was like, oh, it just set me back another month. I was like, I just was mentally ready, starting to get ready for a May transfer. And it set us back. And I was like, okay, we got to find another donor. So with DEB, they instantly approved it. And my little rep called me. She's like, well, I guess you got what you wanted. I'm like, what do you mean what I wanted? I just couldn't believe the customer service. Like, I love them.
Wow.
I was like, okay. You have 1 blast guarantee. You didn't give it to us. We get a replacement lot. She's like, well, we're going to make sure you get the best donor. So go on there. It has to be proven. It has to be this. And I was like, so I went through all the steps and we picked someone who we just went through, eliminated one night. That very night, we just eliminated until we found this one girl. She had 8 eggs. She looked like me as a child, not as an adult. She had everything else that was great. And we chose her and it got approved through DEB and they shipped it out. And I was like, okay, this is it. I was like, I just didn't feel it. I was just like this. I don't know where this is going to go. I was so my soul had been through too much and I was continuing acupuncture. I was just going through the steps of life. I remember going on a walk with my best friend going, I feel like I'm in an alternate reality where I'm living a life that wasn't supposed to be.
Yes. Such a good way to put it.
I just was in a bubble and I, was losing some friendships that couldn't understand my loss. I was like, it was crazy. Yeah. It was like, you really figure out who your real friends are.
Yeah. I'm curious to see too, just quickly, some of the women that you did connect with that had been through losing their babies due to COVID in utero. What were some of their thoughts? What were some of the things that you guys talked about?
We talked about how unfair it was and how much we hated COVID. Yeah. And I'm really good friends with one, that we've connected. We connected through that Silver group. We started, messaging each other through private message through Facebook. And then now we text each other almost, every week. I talked to her a couple times and she's pregnant now. And I'm so happy for her. It's just it's like, we get it. And so we just get each other on a deeper level of how hard it is to go through pregnancy after that. And, I swear some of the closest people I've met are through these support systems or through through law sports or through like, I met McClare, like, some of these people that you don't even met in person are just like your rocks compared to people that in person who you thought were your good friends. And then they don't understand. And I'm like, I guess people go through your life as seasons sometimes.
Had everybody who had lost a baby due to COVID had the same testing, like the placenta was tested? And
not everyone.
Were there any other ways that they would know? And the reason I ask is just because I'm sure there's some ambiguity out there too for people who, miscarried when they were COVID positive, but it was never fully solved. Like, did you run into any people like that?
Yes, there's a lot on those boards where they don't know if it was COVID. Whenever I see COVID, I'm like, it was COVID. Yeah. I was like, it was COVID. You had COVID. I'm like, or someone will tell me they had a placenta abruption because that's what COVID does too, where they'll have COVID, they'll recover, and then they'll have a placenta abruption closer to like their delivery date. I'm like, did you have COVID? And they're like, yeah, I did 2 months ago. I'm like, well, that was that. It was like, because COVID can live in your placenta for a long time.
Awful.
And they don't talk about this. OB offices don't talk about this. The news doesn't talk about this. They just preach the vaccine, which is great. I'm very pro vaccine, but I don't think there's enough knowledge out there about the effects of COVID in pregnancy. It's almost like they don't really want to talk about the truth and scare people. Not like I'm trying to scare someone, but it's like, you need to know what can happen to your placenta. Like it attacks the placenta. COVID attacks placentas, and every single loss I saw in there, it was blood clots. And, a lot of women are like, I should have been on baby aspirin, blaming themselves. And I'm like, I was on baby aspirin and I still lost my daughter, so it's like, there is no, tell all. And now we're seeing people that are fully vaccinated lose their babies still to COVID. And it's like, it's frightening. It was frightening.
So what do we do? Have you learned anything? Is there anything that people can do?
I really don't know what they can do, but I was in touch with a reporter from ProRepublica. She was going to interview me, but I just couldn't go through the process of really opening my home and everything where I am now up to it. So, but I did tell her about my story, and she said that there's a doctor that she spoke to that she's doing this article about the COVID effects of pregnancy and bringing awareness to it, who can look at a placenta and know it was a COVID loss. I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it. She's like, I think it's still so new. They really don't know what to do to help women with it, just to, get vaccinated and do everything you can and that you can to protect yourself and your baby while you're pregnant. So it's just so awful. It's an awful virus. It's an awful invisible virus that I hate so much.
I'm so sorry, Jaime.
Oh, but we did have that next donor that we went on, and we went through the whole process again, and we got 3 embryos that we sent out to PG testing. And once again, we got 1 normal. I don't know. It must be my thing. And I just knew before they told me the gender, I'm like, it's going to be a boy. And she's like, it's a boy. And I was like, okay. I was like, it was just so different. I was like, and not like boy, girl, I was just so happy to have another embryo and another chance, but I was just still so grieving my daughter's loss. And like,
right. And were you terrified that you were going to get it again? I mean, I know you had the antibodies, but like,
I was vaccinated
again, and even vaccinated, double vaxxed, boosted. I got it double vaxxed and boosted, sort of my whole family. So
I was terrified. So I went through the transfer. I know. I went through the transfer, and June 10th was my day. Exactly 6 months to the day that I delivered my daughter was when I had my transfer with my son. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, it must be a sign, that she's encouraging us along. And as hard as it was, I was just like, I got to put my heart and soul into this, transfer. And I didn't know, again, how to expect my beta results. And I got it through LabCorp, because LabCorp had done my antibodies test from COVID. So I got an email from them with my beta results before my clinic contacted me 4 hours later. So I knew I had a 173 beta. I was my God, through the roof. I started bawling because I was just like, I didn't know 2 transfers could work, because you see people go through it. So everyone goes through different experiences. And I was like, is this really going to work? We have 1 normal again. And my beta was 173. I did not go to work. I took the 2 weeks off. I was like, I worked remote, which is unheard of with the hospitality industry during a pandemic. And I went to my second beta and it was 404.
Oh,
so I was
wow.
like, okay, I had to go to work and I was so nervous that I was going to go in there and get
terrified.
COVID. So I was like, I just kept my distance, didn't do any tours. Like I just was, so
Were people
scared.
understanding at your job after everything you'd been through?
They didn't know I had the transfer. So they didn't know. They just thought I was just being my weird self because I've been through so much. And I kept away and I went later that week. I had my ultrasound with Dr. Jane and we saw this. I was so worried because I didn't see the sac with my daughter. He saw it right away. He's like, this is great. This is all you can see at this point. And I was like, Chris, I'm going to go in and quit my job.
Yeah.
So I went in there and I was like, I told them they knew my whole, they knew my loss, but they didn't know why. I went in there and I told my GM and my boss and I was like, please wear a mask. And I was across the room and I was like, I'm pregnant. And they were so excited. And then I told them about how I lost my daughter and I'm like, I can't be here. And they got it. They were so understanding. And they're like, my boss is like, how about we make you remote and we try to keep you on as long as we can. He's like, are you planning on coming back? I'm like, no. He's like, how about we just, take this as long as we can. We'll do the tours. You work from home, you sell, you do the contracts and you'll train your replacement. And he talked to the corporate office. I got it. He's like, I need a note from your OB that you need to work remote. And she wrote me one instantly.
Yeah.
And she's like, no doubt she needs to work home.
Yes.
Because I'm like, my PTSD is like through the roof.
100%.
And the corporate office denied it. They're like, we don't do remote. I'm like,
oh my God. Are you fucking kidding me? Sorry.
Yes.
That's infuriating.
I was like, I worked through a pandemic for you. I was one of 5. I was like, they made us be security guards, like all this weird stuff because there was 5 of us. I was like, and I lost my daughter to COVID. I probably got here through these tours and then you deny it after they came up with this whole plan. And my boss was like, we can't lose her. She sells the weddings were the only thing that were really happening at that point because corporate wasn't coming back with events. So I was like their breadwinner. He's like, we can't lose her. Finally, they agreed to keep me. They decreased my pay and said it was because I'm not driving to work. I was like, this is ridiculous, but I didn't fight it. I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. I didn't know I got paid to drive to work. I got paid for my skill level, but I was like, whatever. They decreased me to 30 hours. The people at work were going to do the tours for me. I worked 1 week in the office. And then when I was 6 weeks, I went straight to a task force remote. I signed a new contract with them to work through October 31st. And I was home and I didn't go anywhere but doctor's appointments because my PTSD and fear of COVID was
100%. I wouldn't have gone anywhere. Exactly.
We did curbside groceries. Like I didn't see anyone.
Yeah.
Anyone. I didn't see anyone. And the people that understood and I lost some friends because I didn't see them. But I was like, you know what? Pregnancy is more important than someone that doesn't understand.
Yes.
So
how could someone not understand that?
I don't know. So I don't
understand how they couldn't understand.
I don't get it. And I just literally, my husband and I holed up in our house. I went on walks. I would stay away from people. I concentrated on my pregnancy. I booked so many weddings for them from home. I would do Zooms with them. And I just was, killing it with my job. And I just was, each appointment was so hard for me. When we went to the heartbeat appointment, I was so nervous and his heartbeat was only at 123. And I was comparing it to my daughter that was 146. And I remember texting McClare. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this bad? Is this bad? I'm like, is this low? And she's like, no, Isaac was the same. He was the same. You got this. She pumped me up. She's like, he was the same.
Yeah.
He was her son. She called him because he wasn't named yet.
Right.
We didn't know his name yet. He wasn't born yet. But I remember her telling me no, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. But I was freaked out because it was so much lower. My RE, how he is. He's like, yeah, it's okay. We'll come back in 2 weeks. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I went back and it was in the 160s and he was strong and he looked great. And I went to my OB office and I was so happy to be back there. And I was like, thank you. Goodbye, clinic. Goodbye.
Bye.
I was like,
I'm
finally saying goodbye. And,
yes.
She sat with me for a while. My first appointment and I remember there was another girl and I was just crying about the COVID and my PTSD. And she's like, She's like, I get it. She's like, we're seeing it more and more. She's like, I will see you as often as you need to.
Good.
She's like, I get it. As often as you need to. We don't need to do Dopplers. We can do ultrasounds, like,
Great.
as often as you can.
That's awesome.
We're here for you. She goes, you know where I work. She has 3 offices. You know what days I'm where. She's like, you just walk in here whenever you need to.
Yeah.
And it was such a huge support. And
really great.
It was really great. And like, she saw me every 2 weeks, ultrasounds, and it was great. And then I got to that 23-week gestation period that I lost, my daughter at, and I had major issues that week. Sure. My brain just went berserk. And anytime, like if my husband sniffled, I would think he had COVID, like even though we never really went anywhere, it was just hard. Everything, like, oh, did you get too close to the person putting the groceries in the car? Like I just was going crazy because of my loss. And,
that makes
my son
complete sense.
Was kicking away. He was fine. And then one morning he just wasn't, he might've been sleeping. It was the same week of like the same gestation week. I went into LED and I was a wreck. And I went to the same hospital that I lost my daughter, and they put me in the same room that I lost her. And I was like, oh my God, am I going through this again? I just couldn't. I was like, why did they freaking put me in the same room? And my husband's like, they don't know. And and then they weren't going to do an ultrasound because I wasn't 24 weeks. And then I was like, I lost my daughter. It's the same gestation. And then the nurse was like, she told her, like, she needs an ultrasound. You need to give her. And they gave me one, and he was fine. And then I started feeling kicked throughout the day. It was just like all mental. Yeah. It was all mental. And that was my last, the next week was my last week at work. And I was like, I need to just concentrate on this pregnancy and not be working. And I got through that week, and we decided to go on a little trip up to a place by the lake. And I don't know if it was the best decision, for us, because I was still so worried about COVID, and we had to eat in a restaurant around people. And I was just so distracted. And it was like a small little place on the lake. So the room was like really tiny, and like we'd go to an apple orchard, but the whole time I was so freaked out. And when I got back, I was so freaked out. I was just freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
And then
were you testing, like COVID testing?
No, because I'm freaked out over testing.
Right.
Like those tests
makes
remind me
sense.
of pregnancy tests. So I'm like, no.
I know, they're so similar.
So, but each day I just felt fine. I like, we got through the weekend, and that's when it was like Delta was getting better. Like it was getting like less people had it. So we went at at a time that not as many people were getting COVID, but then, it got worse again with Omicron. But I went into my 24-week, that glucose test, and I puked and fainted after the test. It was just like, like everything was just PTSD with me. I was just like, oh my gosh.
You went through
like,
trauma.
Trauma. And at the week of Thanksgiving, I had spotting again, and I have no idea why. So I went into, I walked right into my doctor's office. She wasn't at that one, and they did everything, and there was no reason for it. Literally no reason for it. They just they just didn't know what it was. And then I never had it again. And Omicron hit, and I was just like, I wasn't going anywhere anyways. I just was like, it really freaked me out, even going to a doctor's office in December and January with how Omicron numbers were. And I was in an IVF group on Facebook, and I was seeing women get COVID left and right. And sometimes I'd have to just mute the group. I just couldn't see it. And I told my story, and some women are like really great with it. And some women were like, well, I was fine. And I was like, oh my gosh, my baby wasn't. It was, I just went through so much PTSD. And my OB I was due February 26th. She decided to induce me at 38 weeks because my blood pressure kept going up at every visit, because I was just so much anxiety. And he was born on February 12th. My little boy, Brody Robert. He's just like the love of my life. Yes, Brody.
So Brody is here.
He's here.
He's healthy.
He's healthy. He's a strong little boy. And it's still hard though. Like he's just like the love of our lives. But every time I see him go through a milestone, I still think of my daughter.
Of course.
And what we didn't get to experience with her. So it's like a lifetime grief, roller coaster of what we went through. But I'm also so blessed and glad that I have him here with us as well, because he's such a blessing, and he's such a happy little baby, and he's so good. And he's 4 months old, and he he's just such a love. And, I remember after I got home and I took a shower, just like I took a shower after I got home losing Emily. And I was like, I did it. I was like, I finally gave birth to a live baby. And I was like, I did it. And I was like crying. I was like, I did it. And I was like, I couldn't believe I finally was holding a baby in my arms after everything we went through, all our losses and the journey. And we got through COVID. And I'm so happy that babies now, when they're 6 months, got approved to have vaccines, because it's still a worry with us, with him even being little and everything like that. It's just always that word is always going to be a trigger, but we're so blessed. He's such a joy in our lives.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you to Jaime for coming to me with her story. You're such a badass. You're so brave after everything you went through. And Brody is so adorable. And Emily, we honor by telling the story and by sharing the story. So thank you again to Jaime. Thanks again to Maiclaire for sending her my way. Thank you all for listening. And I will talk to you guys next time.